Okay, so we're going to be creating some Java programs on our computer. And in order to create these programs, we need a development environment. And one of the best development environments for Java is Netbeans. So we can do a simple Google search for Netbeans to find the website. And then once we reach the website, we just have to go to the downloads and you'll find the latest release of Netbeans, and that's the one that we want to download. So we can just locate that and then click download. And then depending on which system you're using, whether it's Windows, Linux, or Mac, you will download the appropriate version. In this case, it's Windows, so we're just going to go ahead and download Windows. Okay, so now that that is downloaded, we're just going to go ahead and run the installation. Okay, so the installation is complete, so you just have to hit finish now. And now let's just go ahead and open our new application. So the first thing we're going to do here is create a new project. So we can click on this icon right here, or we can also just go to File and then New Project. And the project that we are going to be creating is a Java application. So we can just go ahead and click Next here. So Java with Ant and Java application. So we hit Next. We're going to give our project a name. In this case, we'll just call this Demo. Make sure Create Main Class is checked, and then we hit Finish. So here we are. Here is our Java class, okay? And as you can see, it looks very familiar. Here we have the class name, and we have our main method here. So let's dive right in. Let's create a program here that is just basically going to ask the user for their name and then greet the user. Okay, and we're going to use a scanner here to collect the user's input. And if you notice here, this is underlined in red, and that is because we haven't imported our utility package. So first, I'm just going to collapse all of these comments here just to make things a little bit more clear. So now I'm just going to import the util package. So as you can see, the red underline is now gone. So I'm going to now collect the user's name and assign it to a variable called name. And then finally, we're just going to greet the user by saying hello and then the name of the user. Okay, so now our program is complete. So in order to run our program, all we have to do is click this green play button right here, or we can just go into run and then click this. And as you can see in the output, we see what is your name. So we can actually type directly here. And then we hit enter to enter our input. And as you can see, we get the expected output, which is hello, John Smith. So this is basically how we can create a Java program in Netbeans and run our program. So now let's create a program with a graphical user interface, okay? So instead of interacting here in this little box, we're going to build an interface that a user can interact with. So let's create a new project here. Once again, it's a Java application, and we're just going to rename it to something more appropriate. We'll call this project GUI for Graphical User Interface. And we're just going to make sure that we uncheck this create main class. We hit finish. So here, when you look in the top left, we have our project view. And in this project view, we can see the structure of our project. So we're just going to right click inside our defaults package. And then here, we're going to select the JFrame form option. We're going to give this class a name. We'll call this my GUI. Right now, we just have a blank canvas. And here, if you look onto the far right, we have a palette. And these are various different items that we can drag and drop into our canvas here. Okay. So for instance, if we wanted to add some text, we can just drag and drop the label here. If we wanted to add a button, we can drag and drop that here. We can add several different things. We can even add a slider here. We can add some type of text field as well. And in order to view this application that we are creating, once again, all we need to do is hit the play button or the run button right here. And we're going to select this as our main class, the MyGUI. So we hit OK. So as you can see here, we have all the different items. We have our slider here working. We have our text field here. We have our button here. And we have our label here. So we're going to remove a couple of these items. And we're just going to leave the button and the label right here. So when you click any item here, on the right side, you will see a bunch of properties that this item has. So we can modify the properties of the item to change the item. So for instance, let's say we wanted to change the text color to blue. In that case, we'll modify the foreground property. We can even change what this text says. So in this case, I want it to say, click me. Okay. And we can even change the font size as well. So we can make this slightly bigger. And we'll do the same for our label. We're going to customize our label here. And we're going to make the text here say welcome. So now if we preview our program, we should now have a blue button that says click me and some text here that says welcome. So right now our program is pretty much boring. It does nothing. It just displays a button that doesn't do anything when we click it. But in order to perform an action when you click a button, all you need to do is double click the button, and then we can write the code for the action that we want to be performed. So we just double click this, and then right here in this section right here, we can write the code for what we expect to happen when we click the button. So in this case, we can just print out click. So before we proceed, if you notice here, this whole entire thing was automatically generated for us based on this design right here. So when you hit design, you can go back to your design view. And when you hit source, you can go to the code view. Okay. So like I mentioned, everything we do in the design view automatically generates code inside our source view right here. So let's just go ahead and run our program. And now if I hit click, as you can see, we get an output here which says clicked. And every single time I click this button, that output gets generated. So typically when a user is interacting with our program, the user is not going to see this IDE or this development environment or this output view. Okay. So when we click me here, what I want to happen is this welcome view right here, the welcome text, to be updated to clicked instead of updating it inside our development environment. So we're going to go ahead and modify our program to do that. So before we can modify this item right here, we need to know exactly what the variable name for this item is. And if you notice here on the bottom left side, we have all our items and the variable names for the items here. So instead of JLabel, let's call this info text. Okay, so I'm going to modify this by just double clicking it. Okay, so now the variable name for my label right here is info text. So if I go back into my source view or the code view, as you can see, the variables are automatically updated here. So I'm going to use that variable, which is now called info text. And info text, or the label, has several different methods. So there are different operations I can perform on that label. And you can see a whole lot of those methods here, but the only method I'm actually interested in is the set text. The input for that method is going to be what we want to update the text to. So in this case, I'm just going to update it to clicked. And now if I click the button, as you can see, the welcome text got updated to clicked. Okay, so now let's make this program a little bit more interesting. So we're going to create a clicker that basically counts up. Each time we click a button, it's just going to increment the count by 1. Okay. So first of all, let's just make this start at 0. So the text here, we're just going to make 0. And we're going to make this much bigger so that we can see it. So we're going to make the text size 100, and we're going to make it bolded. Okay, so I'm just going to run this just to see if it's the size that I'm looking for. Okay, looks good. And now to update this number right here, we can go into the source, or we can also just double click this. So here we're no longer going to print out that the button was clicked, but instead we're going to set the text to a number. Okay. So the reason why you're seeing this red underline under this count is because the variable hasn't been created yet. Okay. So if I was to create the variable in here, so let's say int count equals 0. If I was to create the variable in here, every single time I click the button, this action right here is going to be performed, which means that the count is always going to be starting at 0 every time I click the button. But in this case, since we don't want that to happen, we're just going to move this from inside this function right here. And then we're just going to place it outside, somewhere outside. So this should be fine. So now the count is not always going to be reset to 0 whenever we click the button. But as you can notice, we have another underline right here. And this is because the set text method is expecting a string. We are passing in an integer. Okay. So a quick way to resolve this is just to have an empty string and then add that integer to it. So anything that we add to a string will be translated as a string. So in this case, this number will now become a string. So now let's go ahead and run our program. So we're starting at 0. And when I hit click me, as you can see, the number just keeps increasing. So to give this more of an interesting look, instead of just counting like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we can have it say 0, 1, 0, 2, 0, 3, 0, 4, and so forth. So there's several different ways to do this, but we're just going to use an if statement to accomplish this. So if the count is less than 10, then we're just going to put a 0 in front of the number. Otherwise, we're just going to display the number as is. So we remove the 0 here. And now let's run our program again. So now it looks like this. I mean, right now there isn't much you can do with this program. But I guess you can turn this into a game by trying to do the most amount of clicks in under, let's say, 30 seconds or so. So just to go over what we've learned here, we learned how to create a Java project. And then we learned how to create a JFrame form. And then we learned how to add items to our JFrame form. We learned how to modify the items that we add to our JFrame form. And then we learned how to modify the variable names. And then we learned how to add some action to our items. And then we learned how to write some code which will be executed when an action is performed.